thank you very much for joining on this Friday afternoon, where you could be a million other places, but you're here. So thank you very, very much for what promises to be a great session. There's a lot to cover, and we'll be touching on some really pertinent things, not least the kind of the future of the UK and innovation, and what can we practically do at borough level and innovation district level to kind of push forward on some of our strengths. I'm Jordan Cummins. I'm the head of policy for London at the CBI, the UK's biggest business organisation, and I'm delighted that you can join us today to discuss the innovation ecosystem and how we support entrepreneurship and new spaces for business growth. I've got a distinguished panel of speakers, 6 fantastic speakers who will kind of come to in turn shortly. But just before we do so, I wanted to kind of set the scene and tell you why the CBI were kind of delighted to be involved in the session today. It's a critical moment for the UK. We're experiencing some of the greatest change we have done economically and societally for decades. But there are green shoots, and there's a real opportunity, I think, from our perspective as we build back to recover from coronavirus, to have a strong central focus on our position globally in the world and the domestic strengths which kind of underpin that position and cement that position globally. And a big part, I think, of that position is innovation, R&D, and dare I say it, brand Britain, and the things that we develop here and why we're so good at developing them and how we kind of foster those ecosystems for growth in the UK, which we have a really good, strong track record of. And I think London as well has a really good track record, from the grouping of media and biotech that I was discussing with Andrew earlier on in White City to the Knowledge Quarter in King's Cross. We do have a reputation of creating these inviting, productive spaces, which have both professional and societal benefits. That's why it's fantastic to see the blueprints announced today, the Innovation District for West London, which the CBI stands firmly behind, as we look to the kind of next stage of our economic recovery, and what we do as we kind of build back better from coronavirus. And I hope that today we can come away from this session with some real practical opportunities and some positive outlooks on the strengths we have in the UK and the actions we can take in the short term to kind of determine our long-term success. Now, I could talk about the economic recovery and the economy for days, but instead I want to bring you to the panelists who have much more innovative things to say than I do. So instead of introducing everyone in turn, what I'm going to do is I'm going to come to everyone one by one with a key burning question that we really want to hear from you on. And the first on my kind of hit list is Councillor Steve Curran from Hounslow Council. So I'm going to bring you in first, Steve, with a kind of burning question that we'd love to hear from you on, which is, why is your borough and I guess the surrounding area of Hounslow attractive for businesses? And how does Hounslow and the wider West London area look to foster entrepreneurship and support business growth?
Okay, well, thanks very much, and hello everyone. I obviously, as a leader of a London Council of Hounslow, I want to talk about Hounslow, but I'm going to talk about it a bit more wider than that because we're part of the West London Alliance, and it's really important that we recognise that the whole of West London has been gravely affected by the downturn in the aviation industry. So I'll flip between the two, I think, between talking about West London and Hounslow. There's other councillors on this call, so if I talk too much about Hounslow, they'll get upset. I'm sure Andrew won't, but and he can't kick me under the table, so I'm okay. But it is important that we recognise this as a shared problem across West London, across London and the country. I think we would all recognise that. So why is Hounslow important to entrepreneurship, to innovation? I think it always was, and it is. Our juxtaposition to Heathrow, evidently, with the demise of the airline industry for the short to medium term at least, has had a dramatic effect on Hounslow, on our startups particularly. We have 18,000 SMEs in Hounslow. We have a very strong Hounslow Chamber of Commerce and Brentford Chamber of Commerce. They work together. We work with them hand in glove. So that common goal is really important to us, and we do work very closely with them. And we've had, over the last 10 months, a lot of joint initiatives to try and support business and support those jobs and apprenticeships that are the core of the economic lifeline of Hounslow. So in the west, you've got Heathrow Airport itself is the biggest employer in West London, and you've got other companies, anchor companies in the west, like SAP, who I think are sponsoring today. And Seagrove. So they're really massive companies to us. They're very, very important. And then if you come back to where I live in Brentford, so I'm speaking from today, you've got the real anchor companies on the Golden Mile, which is SmithKline Beecham, JD & Co and B-Sky-B. I mean, these are massive multinational companies. They employ hundreds of people, and they really, I think, are the attraction to small and medium enterprises and startups. So the council has realised this, and we've done a lot of work over the last 10 months on our economic recovery plan, and that's been approved by Cabinet and is now out there. And I was really grateful from the support we got from business, from education, from the private sector, everyone coming together for one Hounslow, and that's been really important to us. So supporting those startups is vital for us. Creating an environment that people feel comfortable coming to Hounslow and West London is really important. So even though Heathrow's quiet at the moment, I'm sure it will come back. It must come back. Just a little plug for a conference that we're organising next week. It is on Tuesday. I'm just getting up so I get it right. So it's Tuesday between 2 and 4 p.m. But that's looking at aviation community. Today we're talking about business, we're talking about the economic growth, etc. But also we need to talk about the communities and how those two interface. So next Tuesday, as I say, between 2 and 4, we've got an aviation communities conference. It'll be pretty similar to this, but we've got communities and representatives from right across the country. So whether it's an airport in Newcastle, Birmingham, Luton, Stansted, City Airport or Gatwick, we want to talk to those people who are going through and dealing with exactly the same problems that we are in Hounslow and West London. So absolutely, we are a destination for innovation and startups. And I think what we've got to do and work really hard on now is how do we replace those jobs, create new jobs, create new skills and new expertise for the green economy. And I've said this, I must be boring if anyone's heard me say this before. I'm not sure what the green economy really is, and I'm hoping today I'll hear about what that is and what that turns into and how does it actually turn into jobs and growth and development. So, I'm delighted to be on the call, and I'll shut up now, Jordan, if that's okay.
Thanks, Steve. I mean, there's a lot in there. You've just inspired about 5 additional questions that I'm going to come back to you on later, not least what does the green economy mean? But one thing you did say, which I would like to come back to in the discussion, is that role of local leadership is so central to a lot of this, because nothing happens on the ground unless the local leaderships and the arms of leadership, are mobilised. But talking of mobilisation, I'm going to bring Gary in from Innovate UK, who's much closer to all of the fancy stuff that I don't quite understand, Gary, in terms of what you guys and your team does every day. But I guess my burning question to you is, for the people on the call, what is it that Innovate UK do? And I guess how is the future of flight, given the focus of the conference today, going to be different from what it was before?
Thank you, Jordan. I much appreciate being here this afternoon. It's a fantastic opportunity to talk about these issues. So firstly, Innovate UK is the UK government's central agency for innovation and development capability, principally in business. It is part of a wider body called UK Research and Innovation, again, a government body that also does basic research in universities and beyond. To give an idea of scale for those who are not close to it, last year, UKRI spent over £7.5 billion. So this is kind of large scale investment in innovation. If I come to the specifics of flight, I'm the challenge director for what's called the Future Flight Challenge, which is one of the central government's major industrial strategy objectives. And my job is, frankly, it's one of the most interesting jobs I've ever had. It's fantastic. We are working with the wider aviation industry to bring to bear the innovations and new technologies across aviation rather than aerospace that allow new classes of air vehicle to come into being. This is at least a 20-minute presentation. I'm trying to do in 3, but those classes of vehicle include drones, so large industrial drones. Just a scope for people, some of the people we work with, they're talking about 1 or 2 ton freight carrying drones, significant pieces of kit. Then we look at air mobility vehicles, which right now are typically 3 to 5 person passenger carrying, typically electric vehicles. And then we also look at kind of sub-regional electric or hydrogen powered vehicles. So that's the thing we're doing. To a degree for aviation, it's a new set of markets. It sits beneath classic aviation, certainly sits beneath the stuff that people would see at Heathrow typically. And so, you could ask a question of why does that stuff matter right now when large scale aviation is in such a difficult position? But there are a number of things for me. One, it is a new set of markets in its own right. It's a really buoyant market. So if I just cover the air mobility vehicles, last count, we reckon there were 293 organisations globally developing such vehicles. It's very bright, vibrant, it's a very active market. So for us, UK, huge opportunity to get into these new markets. Second point I would make is all of the technologies and innovations that we're encouraging, they feed directly through to large aviation. So we're looking at decarbonisation, electrification, autonomy, regional flight, a whole load of uses of digital technology and multimodal transport. I'm really passionate about this. That is a safer place and a de-risking place to develop some of those technologies, and they will feed up into large aviation. And the final point, just on that, before I leave you with a positive message, is the partnering is critical to us. In developing these new forms of aviation and new forms of air transport, we've been building for 18 months a community of aviation. Because aviation is a really, really important community, but it's really several different, somewhat siloed communities. And we've been working together with others to bring that wider community together. And we see partnering as critical. But really, it's the partnering of different types of organisation. The amount of startups there are in this space in aviation, the amount of adjacent high-tech digital and technology companies, and the way they're partnering with some of the most established names on the planet, Heathrow, some of the large aerospace companies and beyond, that partnership's fantastic. So the melding of deep, long-lasting knowledge in aerospace and this kind of quick, nimble, new ideas, that's fantastic. And the point I'd like to leave you with is, we are in crisis mode as an industry. I've worked in aviation and aerospace for more than 30 years. We've seen nothing like this. It's hard not to be downbeat. And yet, with the companies we work with, their approach to innovation, and frankly, they're seeing the COVID-19 crisis as a trigger not to slow down, but to say, how do you innovate faster? The world needs more and better solutions more quickly. So that it's the community we work with is just full of people trying to move at pace to develop innovation. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Gary. Again, there's loads of stuff in there I'd love to come back to, not least the dynamics of partnership. And I think especially in a digital age where usually I would be beaming to you from the CBI's fancy headquarters in the middle of the city, but I'm beaming to you from my own bedroom instead. People will ask, why I'm working from home? Why do I need to be physically next to another business in a knowledge quarter or a catapult? But actually, sometimes it forces some incredible innovation. And like you say, that dynamic of partnership, not least between businesses as well as between business and government, is something I'd love to come back to later. But we've touched on skills a couple of times. So I'm going to come to David now from West London College. And my burning question to you, David, is how does West London's skills provision support innovation, entrepreneurship, and I guess business growth? And kind of from your perspective, where are the gaps, I guess?
Yeah, thanks, Jordan, and welcome everyone. I'm David Warnes, Deputy Principal of West London College. We're one of 6 further education colleges in West London working on this agenda and the skills landscape. I guess the thing that struck me the most over the last sort of 6 to 8 months is the spirit of collaboration. And I think when it comes to skills and addressing this agenda and really driving productivity and growth, I've been really impressed by how not just the colleges, but the universities and the private providers have really collaborated and come together on this agenda to really drive opportunities and make sure that the businesses that are innovating have the appropriate talent and the skills pipeline coming through to enable them to do that and remove some of those barriers. We've seen some fantastic examples of individuals who are looking to set themselves up as entrepreneurs, or businesses that are looking to grow and expand in this current climate. A couple that I'll just mention that have been quite recent. Chelsea Foundation Football Club runs an online entrepreneur club, a program designed to enable individuals to get the skills they need to start up their own businesses, look at how they might finance them and how they might then market and launch them in this particular climate. And that's proving really successful. There's a lot of individuals that are now looking for the opportunities that might present from that. Steve mentioned about the green skills. We've seen a lot in this space. This is something that certainly the collaboration I mentioned, the colleges and other providers are really working on this. Some examples of the green skills, just to sort of contextualize that, things like external wall insulation, air heat pumps, solar paneling, insulation, internal insulation. These are all skills that have been massive in demand since the launch of the Green Homes Grant, and will continue to be so with the announcement of the 10-point plan from the Prime Minister recently. So these are skills that there are gaps at the moment. Employers are looking to fill those gaps and looking to expand their businesses and drive that growth, but need the skilled, trained individuals to be able to do that. And that's something that the providers and the training providers and the colleges have stepped up to provide that information and provide that training opportunities to really give people those stepping points into jobs and into work. There's been a lot of really good initiatives coming from Greater London Authority and others like that around innovation grants. And around the new enterprise allowance and these opportunities that, again, really allow the skills providers to look far more flexibly than they perhaps have in the past, and look at ways in which they can work together to provide solutions and skill solutions, and ways in which they can maximise these funding opportunities to provide some of that training, a lot of it for free or publicly subsidised. And I think those are things that we need to just capitalise on and keep going and lobbying for more of those funds as well, to enable us to provide that baseline of skills for these individuals that want to get into innovative enterprising agendas and jobs and careers as well. I think for me the biggest challenge at the moment is around how we work with employers and identifying what those skills needs are and where those opportunities might be. And I think that is something, again, that West London is particularly good at, using examples like the West London Business to bring both employers, colleges and providers together to make that connection. And there's certainly a lot of programs we've run in the last few weeks that have really benefited from that collaboration and having the likes of West London Business and others coming together to form that partnership working. And I think that's what's really impressed me. And I hope, and I'm very optimistic, that spirit of collaboration will continue past the pandemic and into a long-term sustainable way of operating. Thank you.
Thanks, David. Some really, again, poignant stuff in there, and some of the work the CBI has also done is on those kind of retrofit jobs that actually could carry with them a lot of inherently transferable skills, so that you make sure that people don't just have one job for one set of houses and then it's all gone, to make sure that there's actually a long tail of things and places for those people to go. And we could be talking about hundreds of thousands of jobs just in one city. So this could be a real opportunity. So I'm really glad you raised that. Pat, I'm coming to you next from the Institute of Technology. And my burning question to you is, I guess, what are the aims of the West London Institute of Technology, and how does it seek to support and develop innovation? And what are the opportunities for the Institute? And again, what are the challenges from your perspective? You're just on mute, Pat. That's the sentence of 2020.
First challenge, isn't it? First challenge. Right, thank you. Yes, so I'm Pat Carvalho, and I'm Deputy CEO actually of HCEC, which is one of the FE colleges that belongs to West London. And just to agree with David, we do work really well collaboratively for that development of skills that are so needed in the sub-region. But for us at HCUC, alongside our anchor partners, Brunel London University, Heathrow, Fujitsu, and indeed West London Business, we've come together to establish what's known as the West London Institute of Technology, really aimed at the higher level skills. So part of that journey, that continuing journey from entry right through to level 4-5 is our focus. And we've come together like this because it's been seen, particularly for London, that there is a skills gap, in this landscape. And we've come together with both HE and with employers, because all institutes, there are 12 of us across the country, are employer-led institutes, so that we can try to make sure that we are really delivering to the skills that that employers are requiring. So for our IoT, our concept is one of design engineering, which is probably not surprising when you think about our anchor partners, and that's around engineering, digital, and construction. So we really want to make sure that we are helping to develop the skills that are really needed with the new and future technologies that's certainly coming through. For example, with Industry 4.0, as well as the green skills agenda. So what's also part of that is the way that we want to make sure that our students that are going to be that are that talent pool are really getting an opportunity to work in a multidisciplinary way. It's really quite central to what our employers want, the skill set that they want our students to develop. And by doing this, they will develop those transferable skills, which employers are telling us that that are really required. So they're not just the skill set for one particular, even one particular area of the sector, but actually can translate across. And whether or not they then need that shorter development around very specific technological skills, that wider transferable skills are actually there. And I feel that this is a really strong part of what it is to have an entrepreneurial mindset and how you take that, so the students get that benefit as well. But and I suppose what underpins all of this is to ensure that we're providing these opportunities for underrepresented groups, whether that's BME or indeed females or mature adults. So what we're about is creating innovation spaces at the IoT to develop those, as I talked about, those essential skills, that the employers are telling us that they need. And we primarily are doing this through work on employer projects. So they're really getting that opportunity to get behind, a problem that, that employers have, or not necessarily a problem, but a design idea that the employers want to kind of see work through, and they're getting those opportunities. And we do that at a small scale and a larger scale. It could be a project that's over quite a number of months. And I think, alongside, work placements, whether that's virtual or otherwise, it's a really good, a founding set of opportunities that students have to really be able to not only develop ideas for employers, but actually to start thinking about how they develop that for themselves, as thinking about being self-employed and taking things on, for their own future. And I suppose finally, one of the final things I would say in terms of what we do is also thinking about, and this is about going back to kind of challenges, and it's that challenge about the gap between having people ready for employers to actually get into, to be ready to take on new technologies and to actually work in the new ways, that employers need, and working with the high value manufacturing catapult. On a pilot around Industry 4.0, and we're looking at two sectors, which is aero and auto, and just finding the gaps around the digitalization agenda, in terms of new technologies, and making sure that we can actually develop those for within this, within our qualifications, now rather than in, I don't know, 18 months' time when everybody's using the technology and then they're looking for the actual individuals and the training to actually kind of have the people there to do that. We're trying to do that, trying to bring something forward so that we're trying to do that in parallel and taking that forward. So that's quite, something I think is quite exciting around some of the kind of things that we're trying to do as an institute but essentially it's about that bringing together of employers, FE and HE to really kind of hone in and try to work on the skills development that's needed in West London. So that's kind of what we're about, and I think David explained the kind of challenges really well, in terms of things that how we're trying to take things forward. But it is about collaboration. Without a shadow of doubt, it's absolutely about the collaboration, but it needs to happen early enough for us to be able to really make an impact, for employers and in terms of productivity and indeed the economic well-being of the sub-region as well.
Thanks, Pat. There's one thing you mentioned there, which if we've got time, it'd be great to come back to, which is the channeling of these opportunities to those underrepresented groups. A lot of this discussion is around growth and innovation, but one central question should always be, who is that for? What is this growth for, and where is this going? And it would be good to come back to that. Lloyd, I'm going to come to you next. We haven't mentioned investment yet, so my burning question for you is, as somebody who's been working on the Olympia development, how will spaces like that development and the Shepherd's Bush scheme support an entrepreneurial culture?
Excellent. Thanks very much for having us. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to share with you a very, very short 60 or 70 second clip on Olympia, which hopefully tells you a little bit about it. And then I'll take a minute or two just to describe how we're doing it. What you're about to see represents approximately 1.4 billion sterling of investment, which we are putting as we speak into Olympia to make it a new district, 14 acres in size, covering over 2 million square feet. For the creative industries to come together in a new district for the creative arts, live entertainment, education, exhibitions, where we will have pretty much a whole mix of different kinds of offer that will specifically target innovation, SMEs. We actually are home to 30,000 SMEs a year at Olympia as we speak. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, but maybe we'll go straight to the video. So hopefully you can see that, and I'll push play.
Great.
And the winner is...
So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an illustration of what we're doing at Olympia. I think that the key messages that I would share with everyone today really are that as an investor into West London particularly, and if you know us at all, you'll know us for a lot of the placemaking and community creating investments that we've made over many, many years. I would say the following. Number one, what is really tremendous about today's discussion is about how we actually continue to ensure that London remains the center of attention in the world as a center for arts, entertainment, technology, innovation. And that's about bringing people to London. And one of our jobs is to ensure that we are creating great places which become destinations that bring people to London. But equally, one of the things that's really important about London is the fact that London also provides an opportunity for companies to show what they're doing here in London out to the world. And we become a showcase. And as a result, one of the important things about London is the ability to ensure that the same places that we're creating as destinations to bring people from the outside here equally need to be able to provide a bullhorn, a megahorn, a platform for SMEs to be able to say, we've created something we think the world really is going to want to see, and to give them the ability to create a diaspora, a spreading out of their great technology. And I think one of the most important things about creating great places that can do both is that what it does for the purposes of building a local economy and a national economy is it tends to bring the entrepreneurs directly in contact, physically in contact with the medium-sized companies and then the really big global multinationals. And if you're an economy in London, you have that unique opportunity to keep both. The problem with investing only in the incubator space is that once they grow, and you do want them to grow, they go elsewhere, and then you've lost them. Equally, what happens is if all you do is you invite the big conglomerates, oftentimes you don't get the innovation. You just get loads of business parks. And so the key that London has to get right, which is where we focus, is on creating those dynamic environments that attract both the innovation and the big global multi-conglomerates, so that literally the technology stays in London all the way from beginning, all the way until it becomes global. And that's a particularly big focus for what we do. You did mention Shepherd's Bush Market. We just bought Shepherd's Bush Market about 6 weeks ago. And we'll be working with the local market traders who've been there since the early 1900s to reinvigorate the market. We're also working very, very closely with Hammersmith and Councillor Andrew Jones and a number of his colleagues to come up with a vision that we think is sustainable. And hopefully in about 2 weeks, we will also be announcing another investment into West London that we're currently closing as we speak. So that is us. I would leave you with one final thought, which is in the end, we don't do this alone. We always do it in collaboration with government, in collaboration with the private sector. And we welcome genuinely people picking up the phone or sending us an email and saying, I have an opportunity or I have a problem. Can we work on it together? We love those calls. We take them all the time. And that's generally how we've been able to do what we do. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Lloyd. That's very comprehensive. And as a West London resident myself, I can't wait to be one of those people in that video when we don't have to distance every second of the hour. So you mentioned Hammersmith, and Andrew Jones is the last person I've got a burning question for. And we haven't yet talked about kind of space, the spatial planning in London and what we do with our space around us. So Knight Frank, I'm told, recently dubbed Hammersmith the top location for satellite offices in a post-pandemic world. So I guess my question to you is, how are Hammersmith and Fulham, continuing to encourage innovation in your borough, Andrew? And is there anything that you've got on the horizon or any challenges that you see from your perspective?
Thanks, Jordan. Yes, well, it's interesting coming at the end. So I'll try and make a few comments in relation to particularly what Steve was talking about at the start, and not just restrict my comments to Hammersmith and Fulham. I mean, obviously we've been working with Lloyd and you, but to come to the core point, in the borough, we developed an industrial strategy, a local strategy back in 2015-16, particularly closely partnered with Imperial College and focused but not exclusively around the White City Innovation District. And I think in terms of thinking about the future of West London, as Steve was talking about, the key point I'd make is about thinking about the system as a whole. That Hammersmith is indeed one of the favoured head office locations. The White City Innovation District has seen inbound head offices of companies in a variety of sectors, Novartis being one in biotech, which are to do with the connectivity of Heathrow, but also to do with who's living and working in Hammersmith and Fulham. But of course, you can see that as part of the wider West London ecosystem. And I think thinking about another innovation district in the Heathrow, Hounslow area, we should think about this approach to innovation in terms of the system as a whole. Companies coming to Hammersmith, that's both head offices, but also those around in the start-up ecosystem, are in sectors that would perhaps be different to those you would think about, particularly because of the space costs and the rationale of location that you might see in a West London innovation district. Our industrial strategy has been very much focused on some of the points that have come out. We are keen to, as we would say, attract the hot areas, the innovative areas of the global economy. We have that in biotech, but we also have it in the creative and cultural media areas. Obviously, Shepherd's Bush famous for television centre. ITV have moved back into that area, companies coming in those sectors around that district. And I think important thinking about West London innovation is to think about the relationship between that and another industrial district and how we impact in that area on the wider West London economy. The other thing I'd say, I think, is about inclusive growth. So, both Pat and others were talking about the importance, and I think there's a question actually about the importance of this being fair growth. Our local industrial strategy has been focused on, as we would say, it's no use having people on the White City estate next to the innovation district knocking on the window, looking in at high value, well-paid jobs. We are about trying to give those residents in our borough and in other West London boroughs the skills that enable them to be part of that growth story and benefit from what is going on in the West London region, in the innovation districts, and in the Olympia investment that Lloyd was talking about. So I think that's the kind of the key point for me at the high level of what we've been talking about this afternoon, to think about the West London economy as a whole. Innovation districts have distinctive features. White City would be distinctive from what we might see in the Heathrow West London district, but it's a story of developing growth that's inclusive around both of those districts in terms of thinking about the future of innovation in the West London economy. And at the moment, one of the things that's important, I just wanted to answer Steve's question in relation to the green economy. We have plenty of innovation going on in the green economy in the White City Innovation District, aside from the biotech. If you think about some of the startup companies, the example I give always, which is not the only one, on the Imperial campus, is a company developing biomass panels, which effectively remove carbon from the atmosphere and create edible biomass. They've been referred to as bionic trees. There's a whole range of technical applications of some of the innovations that the higher education institutions, and Brunel, also part of this, would be included in that, which will lead to startups and the kind of activity that Gary was talking about. And that, in a sense, being a key strength of the West London economy as well, both within the inner part in Hammersmith and also in the boroughs that are further out in the West London Alliance.
Thanks, Andrew. So, we've got about 10 or 15 minutes. I've got a ton of questions, and there's some in the chat that we'll try and get through. And I'm gonna pick on people, so please do fingers at the button ready. So the first one, I think I'm just to kick off. So it's quite broad. But I guess how are you encouraging businesses to come, to your boroughs, to your catapults, to your innovation districts? Practically, what are the tools that we have in our disposal, either at local government level or national government level, to really entice businesses in? A single borough is probably one of several that a large business or a growing medium-sized business is being courted by perhaps to come and set up there. So I guess my question is, what do we have at our disposal to entice people in? And where would you lead, I guess? What would you lead with in that conversation? Steve, I'm going to pick on you first as a council leader, and then I'm going to come to Lloyd, and then I'm going to come to Gary.
Yeah, I think we've got a lot in our armoury actually in local government, and I think that the most important thing is to give confidence. So if there's a startup or a medium size or even a large multinational wants to come to West London or Hounslow, they've got to be confident that they're going to be welcome and that we will do everything we can to support them coming to Hounslow and support their staff. So we have got the tools and we've got the wherefore. So we've just approved our local plan reviews for the east and the west of the borough, and that's making a clear statement about where we see the growth in the borough and what type of growth we want, and that's both industrial, that's also homes, but significantly it's around jobs and the type of jobs we want. So I think we have got that those tools in our toolbox, and we do use them. So I know it's an old adage, but Hounslow, Hammersmith and Fulham, West London is open for business. It has been all of the time. And if you look at the significant growth, certainly in Hounslow, since 2010, that's borne out by the number of homes that we've built. And I know other boroughs in West London are doing exactly the same.
Thanks, Steve. Lloyd, what was it that attracted you to Olympia, I guess? Quick one. And then, was there anything else that you were looking for apart from what was on offer?
Look, I think that, carrying on from where Councillor Stephen Curran was just speaking, one of our favorite questions that we like to ask potential occupiers, talking about attracting businesses into West London, is if we cleared out every single obstacle, money, planning, construction, development, people, and we gave you exactly what you were dreaming about, what would that be? And that dialogue, you'd be surprised how often it opens up an aperture you did not expect to hear in your very first meeting. And we hope in about 10 days to make 3 fantastic announcements about Olympia and major household names that have now signed all of the documents 24 hours ago to basically come and find permanent homes as part of the master plan vision of Olympia. And what we found is that when you ask that question, it's surprising when you hand them the pen, what you can co-author together with them to bring the vision to life. And that is how we've been able to bring those names alongside us. Equally, I think we take a very, very serious level of responsibility on our shoulders to ensure we were asking the question of the right mix of people. It's very important for us to ensure, and I can see it in the list of questions that's coming out, that we enable that dream to be realized for all manner of different kinds of businesses, small, medium, and large, the entrepreneurs and the established. We also have ensured that we can reach out to the educational centers. And so one of the things we've only recently started public consultation on is the idea that if we're going to be a district for the creative industries in keeping with the industrial strategy and attract live entertainment and hospitality at the global scale, that we also work on a very unique public-private partnership to create a school for the creative arts at Olympia. We're very, very excited about it. It's very, very early days. But again, it's the responsibility that we take to hand the pen to a mix of attractive, creative co-authors of the story that we think is incredibly important to get right. Because when you do, that is when the magic happens. And that's really what we aim to achieve.
Thanks, Lloyd. And I guess that last point around the School for the Creative Arts sounds fantastic. Those types of innovations can't be done unless there are lots of people around the table with the same will to make a difference. Going back to the first point we had on kind of aligning local leadership. There's some great questions in the chat, so I might tackle some of those. And a really kind of big existential one, I guess, for anybody who wants to come in on it, on can we change the work-life balance post-COVID in a way that helps regenerate local areas by having shared office spaces based near and around high streets? And I guess that's getting to the heart of something that's been thrown around a lot recently around what is a 15-minute city. And, within 15 minutes from my home, can I get my dry cleaning and go to my office and work out and do all of these wonderful things that I usually have to travel around London to do? Now, anyone to come in on this one, but I might pick on someone. So I'm going to pick on Gary and then maybe David.
Fantastic. I was about to jump in there, Jordan. So you remind me of picking on me, which is a good answer. So a couple of quick thoughts. So one, in the world of kind of air mobility, one of our great passions in the world of drones, we should look at them as that kind of a device. They are a means to connect places much more quickly. And the stuff we're supporting is all kind of carbon neutral, environmentally friendly stuff. So that idea of quick connectivity, some fantastic studies done that said if you can fly one of these vehicles into quite a dense urban environment, the amount of outside city to in-city places you can connect with a small hop on a plane and a 15-minute walk, the ability to open that space up is phenomenal. I also think there's a whole kind of commuting kind of thing going on as well. The amount of dead time there is spent commuting and what's the opportunity to take time out of that. So the only other thing I guess I wanted to share, and I want to go back a bit to the earlier question as well, in order to drive these things through, I think it requires a real conversation with the public, because we're very keen as a challenge not to be just pushing technology into people and then hoping they adopt it. We're keen to have a conversation that said these kind of different forms of flight, they're there eventually because the public wants to use them. So we really need to have a conversation as how do you wish to use those forms of flight? And I think things like work-life balance will be part of that drive, and people are starting to think those thoughts in cities right now. Thank you.
Thanks, Gary. David, Andrew, Pat.
Yeah, I mean, I think a really good example of this is it's not just about work and life balance, but learning and education as well. During lockdown 1, we, along with every other education institution, moved all of our provision online instantly overnight, and we've refined and adapted that over the last sort of 6, 7, 8 months, and that's a game changer for us. And with all education establishments, we're not going to go back to that traditional way of learning in a classroom where people have to, night school, evening classes, those sort of traditional concepts are very much in the past now. And that idea of being able to learn at any time, anywhere, any place is a real opportunity for us to work collaboratively to change the way in which people gain skills and acquire skills in a much more flexible way that they can do at home, at work, any time of the day. And I think that's really something that has been really driven and accelerated. It was always part of our planning, but has been really accelerated through this crisis and is now coming to the forefront.
It's a good point you touch on. Digital access across London is such a massive focus for us at the CBI, and widening provision of digital access as such a basic, right for people across London who still don't have the access they need to participate in our economy. Andrew, I'll come to you.
Yeah, it was just, it was to agree, I think, and I'm sure Steve would say the same thing. There's a great deal of thinking going on around this question of the shift to digital, the change in high streets. I mean, I've cautiously been saying, obviously, that high streets have been under pressure for some time. That one of the potential shifts is very positive for high streets, although different in terms of the use of space, in terms of what kind, whether retail becomes more office space, the 15-minute district, but it's certainly also potentially positive for high street regeneration in terms of small and medium-sized businesses in the high street, and the move, as the questioner says, away from longer distance commuting. I don't think it will be a degree of shift towards that, and a reconsideration, I think, in central London of what office space is being used for, and that applies to some of the sort of the more conventional office space in central Hammersmith, for example, as well. Probably a repurposing of that and a change of use. But I do think there is a potential positive for local neighbourhood high streets, the businesses in them, and there's a great deal of policy thought going on, certainly in the local I'm involved with, around how we can support that through planning and through licensing and through usage change in terms of the businesses that would benefit from that.
And Andrew, just before I bring Pat in, do you think that there is, like you said, there's a great deal of policy work going on, and this is the fertile time to be doing it while we're all kind of sitting at home and wondering what the city looks like in 5 or 10 years' time. Do you think that, from your experience, the boroughs are doing enough to talk to one another on what they're doing already to make sure that we're not duplicating effort? Sorry.
I would say, and I mean, Steve may have a view, that obviously in terms of the crisis that the pandemic from COVID represented, the boroughs have come together. There's been a great deal of conversation. I think this is at all levels. I frequently talk to my economy lead counterparts in London boroughs in a level of frequency in a way we didn't, frankly, before, partly out of necessity, but that has generated a head of steam, I think, around these conversations. There's obviously the London recovery approach, which the GLA are involved with as well, and there's a great deal of dialogue. Maybe that is because people are here at home talking, but I think there really has been a much more developed conversation at the London-wide level between the boroughs. You can see similar initiatives facilitated by the GLA that have been moved forward quickly in response. And I think also partly this has been about the economic response to support businesses in the pandemic, the need for the boroughs to support the hospitality industry and to support the government schemes. That has provoked a lot of conversations between boroughs as well. But now in the recovery phase, I think that this is turning into a longer term policy conversation.
Pat, I'm gonna come to you for parting thoughts, because as always with these things, we've run out of time. But for kind of final thoughts from you, and then I'll wrap up.
I mean, I think the conversation has been, really, really, really helpful. I'm just thinking about it in terms of, from an educational point of view, what is it that we can actually make sure that we're aligned with in terms of, in terms of what the boroughs want to take forward, and indeed in terms of the new technologies, and we'll talk about green skills and how we can support the aviation industry and so on. So for me, it's all about collaboration. And I don't think I can say that it is a mantra that I think we kind of played lip service to before. I think we talk about the West London Institute, it's a little microcosm for me of what we should be doing. That is about employers, that is about local authorities. It's about ourselves in education, whether that's FE and HE, and really helping to support the blueprint and indeed what we're trying to do here, which is around the innovation district. I just think without us all being at the table together, this is not going to have the impact it needs to have.
Thanks, Pat. And with that, you can count on the support of the CBI locally, nationally. Just give us a call. We're always there to support. We've gone over time, so that's my fault as chair. But I'm told to tell everyone who's listening in, please do click the link that Callum has just put in the chat to get you back to the main session for wrapping up thoughts. But for now, it's thank you to all of our panelists. Thank you for listening, and hope to see you again soon. So thanks, everyone.